Welcome to Let's Go Again, a podcast for the independent class where we contemplate the big questions like what is the artist's role in society? And we strategize for the smaller ones, like how do I grow an audience when my posts reach about 5 people per day? We'll tackle those ideas and everything in between. I'm your host, Courtney Romano, a writer-director in Providence and your comrade in arms as we navigate this indie artist group project. My hope is that each episode is another chance for us to reset and figure out this path together, outside of the system and on our own terms. So, as they say on a set, let's go again. I have a confession. I think I've actually lost out on making money because there are too many Instagram accounts on my phone. I have Instagram accounts for work, for my day job, for consulting work that I do, and then my own projects, of which there are about 500. And these Instagram accounts are a problem for me. And I'm saying that I probably lost out on money because I essentially ended up hemming and hawing for about a year just trying to figure out the business model for QB Art House. And for some reason, it was just like not making sense in my mind. I couldn't figure out how to structure it with Queensbird Films. I was like, okay, it's a sister project, but it's within Queensbird Films, but maybe Queensbird is the overall thing. And I was just trying to figure out like, how do these things go together? And after a while and like a lot of introspection, I realized that it wasn't the business model that was putting me off of it. It wasn't that I was bouncing off of. I actually knew what the business model was. I just didn't want to have another Instagram account. I literally just didn't want to make a separate Instagram account because it was like too many accounts. And honestly, I just didn't want to make more content. I was like, how can I possibly make more? And if I have an Instagram account, then doesn't it need to grow? And if it needs to grow, then I need to make content. And if your feed is like my feed, then you see a lot of people who do this, who use content to build their audiences. This is called content marketing. And you know that as an indie artist, obviously building an audience is important. You know, whether you are going the strict indie route and you're trying to build your audience because you need to speak directly to them, or you're trying to break into the industry and the systems that be, and you need a very high follower count for people to pay attention to you. Either way, you need an audience no matter what. But the idea of putting a lot of time and effort and thought into content to feed the billionaire bros instead of making art to move the masses sounds about as appealing as eating a 5-day-old tuna sandwich. That's how I feel. Plus, maybe if you're like me, you have done this before where you've started an account and you've put up a few Instagram posts and no one is responding and it's absolute crickets. Or maybe you've sent out an email newsletter. You're like, okay, this is the thing that I'm going to do. And then you realize like week after week, it's such a grind and everyone's like, be consistent, be consistent. Or maybe you, and I have done this, you've even hired a social media manager and then realized that the expense of that, while the person who's doing the work is obviously worth it, the return that you're getting from putting your attention into that part of your business is not worth it. And so you've tried all these things and it would be super reasonable for you to conclude that content is like way too hard. It requires all of your time. It's got little return on investment and it's just not worth it. I would not blame you for giving up on it altogether, but I don't want you to give up on it because if what I just described is how you're thinking about content as an indie artist, you're not using it correctly. And that's what today's episode is all about. Before we break down how to use content correctly as an independent artist, let's get on the same page and define content. So people think content is Instagram, Facebook posts, TikTok videos, or basically just any random thoughts and photos and videos you might just throw up on social during the day. And while that is definitely content, I would call that fast fashion, empty calorie, churn and burn content. It's like eating a donut after you've skipped 3 meals. It's easy to eat, like you will scarf it down, but it's going to do nothing for you. Calorically, it's worthless. Then there is high quality, magnetizing, non-content content. It's like content that feels more like art, like a story, and like it was made exactly for your audience. And your audience sees it and raises their hand and says, "Yes, please, more of that." Well, like, where else can I find that once they run into it? So it's just a different vibe. The kind of low empty calorie content and that magnetic non-content content. So if you are an indie artist, you should be using high quality content as a way to argue your position. That's how we use content. We don't use content to like tell people what we're doing that day. I mean, you can, there are ways to do that, but you are using content to argue your position. Artists are visionary. We have ideas of where we want to go, and often there's a gap between our vision of what we want and our audience's vision of what they think is possible, right? And our job as artists is to bridge that gap. People are not going to see futures the way that we see them. They're not going to have ideas the way that we have ideas. And people can't see what you see. That doesn't mean they're not interested in it. It means you have to bridge the gap. And part of bridging that gap between the audience and your artwork is to create a direct connection from your audience to your artwork through content. Content shouldn't just be this kind of like superfluous, in my opinion. It shouldn't be this superfluous kind of whack-a-mole strategy of like, let me try this and let me try that. I mean, I'm all for experimentation, but again, to what end? Like, why? What do we want people to do? Ideally, we want the audience to get into the content and over to the artwork and get hooked on the artwork. Why? Because the artwork holds the vision. The artwork has the vision of the future of where we want to go. So we're not trying to trick anyone. We're not trying to like hook people and then do a bait and switch. We are literally trying to use content to let people know if this is something you like, if this is something you're interested in, if you want to have a conversation about this argument that I'm making, then you're going to want the rest of my work. Okay, so how do you start? How do you start making an argument? And what is an argument? Basically, your argument is just your thesis. Your argument is your general thesis about life. What do you believe in? Michelle Pelazon-Lipsitz at Holisticism has a fantastic podcast episode and like a lot of different material on how to make a manifesto. I will link it in the show notes so you can go get it. It might be a paid subscription, but I'm telling you, it's absolutely worth it. So if you aren't sure what your argument is, you can go listen to her manifesto conversation and think about, what are the things that are making me angry? What do I believe? What's the piece of advice that I give to people all the time? One for me is nothing is wasted. So if people say to me something like, well, I started too late, or I did this, or like, I wish I had done this sooner, my automatic gut response is always nothing is wasted. It's going to be okay. And this is the right timing. And that's a gut response for me because it's what I believe. Another way into this, figuring out what your argument is to define an inciting question for you. So in screenwriting, the inciting incident, if you're looking at the structure of screenwriting, the inciting incident is the thing that happens in the beginning of the story that sets the hero on their journey. Okay. So in Jaws, it might be like someone gets a shark bite, right? A shark attacks. And then they're like, oh crap, we got to deal with that. And that's the story, right? The inciting incident is really the spark, and it's connected to what the main character is going to learn. It's connected to the main character's story, their journey. They are doing things along in the story to react to what happened in that inciting incident. And so it holds this potential energy, this kind of like untapped power. And when we take that into thinking about making content and thinking about what is my argument that I'm trying to make in my content, you might say, oh, I know my manifesto, I know my belief system, and I've got that. And like I have a list of 20 things that I believe, and I can make content off of that for days. If you don't have that, you could say, well, what is the inciting question that my work and that I, as a human being, keep asking myself over and over and over again. So, for instance, in my digital series, Kinsley Versus, the inciting question that was coming up for me, this was a series about a writer whose thoughts are so wildly anxious and out of control and spiraling that they become real characters. And she starts talking to her thoughts as if they are people and characters as she's trying desperately to write. So I was asking myself, okay, what if a writer's thoughts were so powerful that they came to life? And the question behind that kind of what if statement was, is writing worth it? Is it worth it to go through all of these things that she goes through over 7 episodes just to write? And that's the question that I was trying to answer through the web series. So when you are looking at your work, look at a few examples of your work and figure out what are the questions, the inciting questions that are underneath everything that I was making in this. Is there a through line? Is there not? There's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. But these two ways of working your way into your argument is going to make you feel A, like you are deeply emotionally connected to it, and B, like you're not just trying to, glob onto online marketing trends, which even as I say that, I get the heebie jeebies. Like, I'm just like, ugh, I think we all kind of bristle at the word marketing instinctually because we've seen so much bad marketing and manipulative marketing. But when you are talking about making an argument, you're talking about something that is like connected to your soul. And that has a different kind of magnetism to it. Okay, so let's use an example here to like kind of go through this a little bit deeper. So if I were going to look at my body of work, let's pretend I'm Greta Gerwig. I pretend that every day. So Greta Gerwig has these 3 movies that we can look at, right? She has more than that, but we are going to look at Lady Bird, Little Women, and Barbie. In Lady Bird, she is talking about and investigating the interiority, the interior life of a teenage girl. So this is very common. This is very everyday, yet it feels a little bit epic in the dynamic with her mother. But generally, it's this very small slice of life movie investigating a girl's feelings. Now we go to Little Women, and you can see Gerwig making an argument that there is something, again, that's really significant in something really small, where at the end of the movie, Jo argues for 6.6% of the profits of her book when she's meeting with the publisher, which is so small, but would have been very large then. And she argues to retain her copyright. And so retaining the copyright means it's hers. So she may not be, making a lot of money, but she's keeping her power and she's owning her story. She's owning her IP. So again, Gerwig is saying, okay, let's investigate this very small moment that actually means something more significant. Okay. And then we have Barbie, where the inciting incident for Barbie, you could argue, is when Barbie verbalizes her fear of death, right? The fear of death is kind of mundane in a way because it's just so human. And all of us on this side of things have no idea about it. And so it's almost this like mundane little thing that we have humming in the back of our minds. It's this thing that everyone considers at some point, and people deal with it in different ways. They might investigate it more, they might completely deny it, they might never think of it because they just don't think of it. They might obsess and fixate on it every day. But it is a kind of common denominator that, like, no matter who you are, no matter what class or society or background you have, like, it's death and taxes. So again, even though this seems like, well, death, like that's a big concept, how she's coming at it is through this like mundane human questioning. And so if you look back through Lady Bird, Little Women, and Barbie, you see that Greta Gerwig is making this argument again and again and again in these different ways about the profundity of the mundane. The little things are actually the big things, and they are worth looking at and they are worth considering. And that is what you might say is her argument. And of course, if she wanted to make content from there, If I were going to advise her, I would say tap into that argument, tap into that point of view that you have. Let's investigate what are the questions that come up when you talk about um, profound, epic ideas that come out of small, tiny little moments. What is in there that we can investigate, that we can talk about, that we can make content about? And I might even say, you know what? You make all these films, but let's make a soundtrack out of this, or let's have you write a Substack series on this. It wouldn't matter what the form was as long as it was filtered through her main argument, because her main argument shows up in all of her work. So if it shows up in the content, it's all going to be cohesive. Another example I want to share briefly is the band Wolfpack, which is a jazz funk band based out of LA. And Greta Gerwig is a little bit easier because I think most people know her and can kind of understand her movies. Wolfpack is a little bit more niche, and they are also doing content marketing. So you can see exactly how they kind of execute this. So they are like some of the best musicians in the world. Like they are just fire and they just have fun. They are, I would say their argument is let's make music and let's have fun doing it. And then they have all these other things. So they have their music, they have concerts and like all that typical stuff. They have vinyls. But then they also have Jack Stratton, who is the band leader. He has a mixing masterclass. Joe Dart, who is the bass player, has a bass masterclass. One of the things I love in Jack Stratton's masterclass copy is he writes, rather than obsess, we compress. And it just goes to show, again, he's having fun. They're having fun. They have newsletters that are absolutely sparse. Like they will tell you one thing. I don't even know if they use punctuation. They'll be like, oh, we're playing at Madison Square Garden, or we're playing, somewhere in LA. Here's the link for tickets. And that's it. There's no hubbub around it because they are purists in a lot of ways too. It's like, let's have fun, but let's also be purists in how we approach music and how we approach collaboration and all of that. And you see that in their newsletter marketing. They also have a website that is literally like there's nothing on it. It's one page and it's where you can get tickets and you can buy their fonts. Like they have fonts that they use in their music videos, and all of this content they make themselves. And they have plugins that you can use or that you can buy, and they have all these different things on there. And it's one page and it's literally just a list that's centered in the middle of the page with the links highlighted. There's almost nothing else. I think sometimes people could hear like, oh, you need to make an argument and think, oh, now I need to generate for your PhD thesis or something. That's not what I mean. You can make an argument for something by having a sparse website, one page website. That is an argument for something. The argument does not have to come in words all the time. It can come in ethos, it can come in aesthetics, it can come in what it's opposing. Like everyone has all these like intricate email funnels, email marketing funnels, and maybe your argument is like, I don't do that. And you do something completely different because it's what you believe in. You're not just trying to be contrarian. You are connecting it to the bigger thing that you believe in, the bigger thing that's in your work. Okay, so that is what I mean by making an argument. And why is this important? Why is it important to make an argument? Why is it important to make content and grow an audience? Making an argument isn't necessarily going to get everyone to agree with you. Although if you are good at articulating yourself, a lot of people will. Making an argument is a way to shift the conversation closer to what you think it should be. And when we're thinking about these ideas and starting these conversations, we are implicitly getting closer to the world that you envision. You are setting the tone. You are setting the syllabus. And believe it or not, people want that and they will follow you when you do that. And it is my belief that artists are cultural players. And I don't know about you, but I think the culture needs some shifting. And I think that we need some readjusting. And if we can skew the conversation closer to a better world through our art and through the content that we're making that supports and kind of buttresses that art, then we are doing some deeply lasting work. Okay, now there's one other thing that you have to do when you're making your argument through content. Otherwise, it is not going to cut through. And the content that you make is going to sound kind of like wishy-washy and bland. And that is you must argue against yourself. Look for the holes in your argument. Look for the hypocrisies or the information that you're not considering, and acknowledge your biases and don't shy away from them. You can do this in a lot of different ways, from arguing a different point of view to playing with your tone of voice to visuals and aesthetics. There are lots of different ways to argue against yourself. And what makes this magnetic is it creates tension. It makes your thesis stronger to be able to hold at the same time the arguments against it. And creating tension is always a good thing, is always a magnetizing thing. So there are, again, many different ways you can argue against yourself. But my rule for choosing how to do this is, what's the most fun? What feels like the most fun for me that I could really dig into and fight against? And how could I subvert my own thinking and see if my thinking stands up to that subversion? So finally, I want to just briefly touch on the fact that there's a refrain I hear from a lot of independent artists, which is, I don't make content, I make art. And I understand it. I do understand it. I just think it's a false binary. If you make art, then make art. Who cares if online marketing gurus call it content? You can look at content as just little flares you send up for your audience, directing them towards you and your thinking and your art. You can also just not think about it at all. Like, you can just do your thing. And you don't have to worry. Is it content? Is it art? Am I selling out? Am I worried about the content machine versus artistic purity? Because here's the thing, life is generally both and. There is artistic purity in content, and there are plenty of machinations and manipulations and untruths and schemes and coercion in art. So I'll leave you with this last thought. When you just get over the fact that you're making content and you decide, all right, I don't care. I'm just going to send out my flares. I'm going to find my people. I'm going to let the content be a bridge from my audience to my artwork. I am going to build a universe of thought around the things that I believe in, and I'm going to invite people into it. When you do that, there is an unexpected result of making content in this way, and one that I've seen happen in my own work, which has been really exciting, which is your art gets better. You get better. You get better. If you practice communicating, arguing for a position, asking questions that get to the heart of an idea, and also interrogating your own assumptions and holding your own feet to the fire, how could you not make better art? That's it for today. I would love to hear what you thought about this episode. Leave a comment on Substack and tell me what you think. Do you make content? Do you make art? Do you have a strong opinion about the word content and the word art in the same sentence? Also, I have one ask when it comes to sharing this podcast episode. I would be so appreciative if you texted this episode to a friend, someone you think might like this. Please send it their way. I would love to grow this way, just from one artist to the next to the next. Thank you for being here, for listening and doing the things you're doing in the independent world. We need your stuff, so keep making it. And until next week, good luck out there.